Welcome to another edition of Wampa Radio. This is episode number 5 of podcast focusing on Star Wars Unlimited TCG. We're going to go and, dangle our bits into various different little pots, as it were. But, Charm3r, you already seem completely done with my nonsense.
Yeah, it did not take long for us to get there. Normally, I'm the one that ruins the flow, but it looks like you're learning from the best, taking it from me.
Was it dangly bits?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Well, remember when the Sarlacc went from being just this like spike pit to some kind of plant beak tentacle thing? I picture those tentacles as the dangly bits that are constantly going all over the place. Does that...
Oh, gotcha. See, I always thought it was like a big worm and maybe those were like whiskers, but you're going for more like a vegetative, pistil and stamen type thing.
Yes, exactly.
So welcome to the Botany Podcast. My name is Charm3r.
The Robotany Podcast?
Oh, yeah, that's actually pretty good, yeah.
Does that float your boat, as it were?
Welcome to Robotany.
I hate you so much.
That floats it.
You know what? You can't cramp my style because I think after like 900 attempts, I have created my own iced coffee with minimal calories in it. So this is how I am staying fresh and clean in that regard. As I just noticed that as I was sort of adjusting my camera on the fly here. I'm gonna have to redo it, but we'll just say that this is good for now. It's all good. We're fine. It's great because this is an audio platform.
Yeah.
We're good.
We're doing it live.
We're doing it live. We're not actually live. I was just trying to mess around with some of the things, and then I realized that there was nothing beneath me. But we're fine. We're good. It's all good.
You know what is beneath you?
What is that?
Learning about Star Wars video games, apparently, because I had the duty of coming up with our Wampa Cave poll of the week. And I think now is a good time for us to go through the results. So let's pop that up now. All right, this week we were talking about the main characters. I don't really want to say like protagonists, if you will, but main characters, because some of these you could go either way. Of famous Star Wars video games, because I feel like there are actually a lot of really cool and interesting characters in the Star Wars universe, and especially some that are only in video games, or some are in like expanded universe, but they kind of birthed themselves in that realm. So the 4 options were Cal Kestis, who is fresh on everybody's mind with Jedi Survivor. Dash Rendar, who's near and dear to my heart. One of the reasons I fell in love with Star Wars in like the video game setting. Revan. We opted to go with just Revan instead of Darth Revan because I didn't want to, push people in any one direction. Technically, when you play that game, you can be good or bad. That's kind of the beauty of, Knights of the Old Republic. And then Star Killer. So this was actually very surprising to me because this poll was far closer than I thought it was going to be.
All right, so full disclosure here, ladies and gentlemen. I have played about maybe 8 hours of Knights of the Old Republic, and I know a lot of people say that it is probably the best Star Wars video game ever made, and I'm cool with that. I came from the land of X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. My 56K modem blasting TIE Fighters out of the sky. That was my introduction to Star Wars video gaming. That turned into... it was N64. It was... Shadows of the Empire. That was like my first bit. I played a little bit of like the Super Nintendo version, like Super Star Wars or whatever it was called. I really liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I love those kind of side-scroller action games. But I don't know Cal Kestis intimately like everyone else does because I don't play RPGs. I don't. If I want a good story... It's not really an RPG though. Well, it's kind of like it's like an action RPG, kind of. But I come from the land of, streaming video games and card games where I have time to think my moves, talk to people, etc. Like I've played stuff. People are like, you should stream Knights of the Old Republic. But the thing about it is, like, as I'm trying to listen to the dialogue and absorb the story, there's people saying things and I have to interact with people and a lot going on and whatever. And then when I'm like, okay, I'm going to play it on my own privately. And then when I'm sitting down to play it, in my head, I was just like, well, I have like 40 Star Wars books that I have left to read. So I'd rather just sit down, relax, and do that. It's not, it's a little bit more letting yourself go into that world without having too much agency over it. I don't have to worry about my decisions about finding this. There's no stress. So I typically do not play Star Wars story-based video games for that reason. So in all honesty, Cal Kestis, Revan and Starkiller, I don't have the same relationship as a lot of other video games, but Dash Rendar is my guy because I think I've replayed Shadows of the Empire for N64 about 2.5 dozen times.
All right, let me let you in on a little secret that I think a lot of people don't utilize enough, especially if they're gamers, because there's this thing called pride that often gets in their way.
Mm-hmm.
You can, like, in the background while you're working on stuff or whatever, put on no commentary playthroughs of video games, because there are YouTubers that just specialize in that, and experience story-heavy games in your free time without having the stress of having to actually play it. So, like, you could, theoretically, while you're working on stuff or whatever, instead of having Netflix on a second monitor, you could pop up just a playthrough of Knights of the Old Republic or, Jedi Survivor, or, the predecessor. Jedi Survivor is obviously the newest one. Jedi Fallen Order was the first time we met Cal Kestis, but I know a lot of gamers don't like to do that because they're like, well, I want to play, but if you don't think you're ever going to get to it and you want to just enjoy the story, there's no harm in doing that. It's just like watching a TV show in my mind.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. As it is, though, the Wampa Cave poll results is Darth Revan getting the win with a 34.8% of the vote. Next up, Cal Kestis at 27.3%. Starkiller, which for those, little factoid, was actually Luke's last name in the original renditions.
Yes, it was.
The original scripts. George Lucas, he was supposed to be Luke Starkiller. He was not. He was Skywalker after that. 19.7%. The remainder, the 18.2% that's floating, goes to my boy Dash Rendar. So either there's 18.2% of the people who have taste, or there's 81.8% of respondents.
To be fair, it's an older game, and I think two of those
but it checks out.
Probably you and I.
Yeah, that's true. It's an older game, but it checks out.
I will say Starkiller has a special place in my heart. The main character's name is actually Galen, but I didn't want, because Galen's used a couple of times in the Star Wars universe, and so I didn't want to confuse people. So he just went with Starkiller, so you knew that it was about that specific character. But the reason that I partially enjoy that character is that it's voiced and acted by the same person who does Darth Maul's voice from Clone Wars and Rebels, right? So it's Sam Witwer. In fact, the character in the game looks just like Sam Witwer, kind of the same way that Cal Kestis looks like the actor there as well. It's like modeled after Sam Witwer, and so it is kind of interesting or weird when you go back and you replay any of those games, because I hear a little bit of the Darth Maul, but I enjoy his work as an actor, so that one's got a special place in my heart too.
What a torch to pick up and really carry with you, because oh my god, the actor who played Darth Maul, who played Toad,
Ray Park.
Yes, Ray Park. I apologize, Ray Park. Did a great job. Bringing the fearsomeness, the actual menacing presence of Darth Maul, no pun intended, to the screen. And though he didn't have many lines, besides what, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi or whatever. And then you have the voice actor who gives Darth Maul that mild psychosis, that obsession that drives him and crazy and sort of leads him into exile, into this rebirth to who he becomes and his quest to exact revenge on Obi-Wan, which, in my opinion, the way that ends and we're not going to give the spoilers if you haven't seen Rebels or whatever. The way that arc ends is so beautiful, and the details within it too, how it goes down. And there's a lot of videos that break this down, and I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, watch the scene where Maul confronts Obi-Wan. Watch that entire scene, and then watch some of the breakdowns, because you'll catch a lot of the little subtle romantic parts of it that are just glorious. That sort of, you look at it, you watch it, and you're like, yes, somebody cares. Somebody is a fan.
And they definitely understood where Star Wars as a whole, from a film-making perspective, got its start, got its roots, right? Everything about that scene is all of the things that I think Star Wars borrowed from in its infancy, and then it's just coming full circle. It's so incredibly well done. But I will also say, my apologies to Ray Park, because the roles he's most famous for are either non-speaking roles, right? So obviously Darth Maul. Many people don't realize he was Snake Eyes in the G.I. Joe movies as well, but you don't get to speak. And then the one time he does actually get to speak, he's Toad in X-Men, and he has that really bad exchange with Halle Berry. Like, I'm sorry, I love the X-Men films. They have a special place in my heart. When they first came out, it came out on my birthday, saw opening day in the theater, but man, some of the dialogue is bad. So like, even when he does get a speaking role, it is not good.
Hey, Charmer, do you know what happens to a toad when it gets hit by lightning?
Oh, I don't know, Flake. What is it?
The same thing as everything else. Bam! And then you got like CSI Miami cut to black, or cut to the opening credits and whatnot. Anyway, we've got an episode. We're recording this a little bit early because I'm going to be on the road. I've got a lot to do. You are probably going to meet me on the road at a certain point, right? In Ohio, I believe. We're going to be out there in the Ohio region doing some Flesh and Blood stuff, hanging out. So we are recording this currently. It is the 4th of July, which for me is a Tuesday, and for you, it's a hot dog eating orgy of freedom and all kinds of other flag waving awesomeness. So congratulations.
Sure.
I don't know.
Let me put it this way. If you celebrate, have a safe holiday, people who are listening in the future. Hopefully you're not listening to this like in a hospital bed because you blew your thumb off trying to light fireworks.
Hey, and if you think that that's stupid, there have been athletes who have ruined their careers because they now have 20% less fingers than they did to catch a football. True story. Look that up. All right. So we're doing this a little bit in advance. It's July 4th. Let's get to some of the headlines, ladies and gentle beans, of which we've got some new cards, Charmer, as the powers that be over at Fantasy Flight Games have blessed some wonderful community members with great cards. I do want to say, actually, before that, as I just consult my notes, the winner of our giveaway has claimed the prize at the 11th hour, messaged me, said, my bad. So their card is in the mail, and I think we're going to do another. We'll set up another giveaway for a future week or so. But again, we want to thank everybody, not just for pushing Wampa Radio over 100 followers on Twitter, but also 100 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. So you guys are awesome. It has been a wonderful journey so far, and we're just getting started. All right, new cards. Hit us with the new cards.
So this was debuted, revealed, however you would like to word that honor, that privilege, by the I Rebel podcast. This is the restored Arc 170. So it is a starship. It costs 2, and it's got 2 factions. It should be heroism, and I believe the other one is the
Vigilance. I believe.
Vigilance. Yes. 2 power, 3 health. So similar stats to, the other X-Wing that we've seen. But this one, however, has Restore 1. Now, I really love this for a couple of reasons, but first and foremost, perhaps the single most important, is that it's got a built-in pun, a built-in play on words, and I am a sucker for that. I love that the restored starship is the one that has Restore 1.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that. I had a feeling. Now, again, if we're comparing this to the Alliance X-Wing, both cost 2, both have a 2-3 stat line. The difference here is that you're getting that little extra keyword because of the restriction on the deployment. As the Rebel X-Wing, I believe, is just heroism, not vigilance, if I'm not mistaken. You now have this, which is the same stat line, the same deploy cost. You slam in the extra aspect as a deck restriction, and now you're sort of rewarded with the restore. And if you played other card games like Magic, you'll know that for instance, a 2-drop, if it's 1 black, 1 colorless versus a double black 2-drop, you're getting so much more by adding extra, resource-related restrictions to it. So I think that this is going to be a pretty decent card. I mean, I think that as a 2-drop space unit, a 2-3 restore, I think that the only thing better than this would be if they come out with something that has like a 2-3. Like, restore is a cool stat line. I just don't like restore, in my opinion, on low drops, unless you can heal above your 30 on the base, right? Otherwise, what we've seen now, though, is vigilance and restore are like heroism. Vigilance is the same duality that you get in Yoda, and here it is on a space unit, the same duality, both with restore taglines.
Yeah, I will say the thing that jumps out to me about this, though, and I think this also matters quite a bit because we talked about this last week, right? And it's the design. Restore only triggers when you attack with the unit. So while I agree with you, I don't normally like units, especially low-cost ones that gain you health unless you can overheal. There is also the fact that you can just sit with this in your backline until you have taken some damage and then opt to engage with it, get that health back on your base, right? It's not like straight lifelink. And so using this, I think, strategically because of the way the keyword works, I think is going to be part of navigating this game in general. So, worst case scenario, it's just like the Alliance X-Wing that we, talked about last week, which, again, that was, as you said, same stat line, but just heroism. Same keywords as well. So Rebel, Vehicle, and Fighter are like the tags, if you will.
The most important thing here is the fact that, again, the stat line deals with a TIE fighter pretty well. It's susceptible to an interceptor. However, it can trade with an interceptor. Like, it's just that same kind of,
Yeah.
Ultimately, yeah.
I just want to say, how long before in this game we get the, dies to Doomblade memes?
Oh, dies to interceptor? We could just start those right now. Dies to interceptor. Yeah.
Dies to interceptor.
Dies to
Garbage.
interceptor.
It's not good. Dies to interceptor.
Like, literally right now, as I dive back into Magic the Gathering Standard, everything I play just dies to cut down. Like, I'm like, what am I playing this? Like, everything just dies to cut down or go for the throat. And yeah, you're not wrong. Dies to interceptor. So we'll give it a 0 on 5 because it dies to interceptor. When in reality, again, not knowing what all the cards are, I think you and I should probably go through, like, once all the cards are released, we'll do a much more robust breakdown of the cards, giving them kind of like a star rating or whatnot. But as for now, I think that this is a significant, obvious upgrade to the X-Wing. However, I think from the perspective of a keyword latched onto this, I would much rather have a plethora of other keywords versus restore. I'd rather have shielded. I'd rather have raid. I'd rather have... I don't think I would want something like Sentinel, but restore is better than nothing. So this goes into any... In my opinion, right now, it's going into any Vigilance Heroism deck that can fit it in, and X-Wings be damned. Next up. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say. No, I was fine. I was just about to say. So the next card that we had revealed this week, this came from main deck, is an event. This is Repair. It costs 1. This is only Vigilance, and it does say supply, which is interesting. It's kind of like the tag associated with the event, because we do know that there are some events that will have things like tactics and things like that. It's interesting to see supply be one, so we'll have to keep an eye out for how many cards have that and how they might be utilized. Now, it feels very straightforward, but I think this is one that could have a lot of power. This says simply heal 3 damage from a unit or base. Now, because in this game we know that the units have a persistent health pool with damage, it doesn't clear at the end of the turn. Being able to heal a sentinel, right, if you're trying to play a defensive deck and block the lanes so that people can't get to things, is going to be a pretty big deal. And it costing only 1 and only having the 1, faction requirement in vigilance, this is seemingly playable. Obviously, we don't know till we see everything else, but it doesn't feel bad.
Yeah, it doesn't feel bad. What we do get here is a little bit of information because, once again, vigilance and restoring of damage, healing damage is now part and parcel, I think, the identity of what vigilance is. We've seen 2 vigilance units with restore. We now see another card from vigilance that offers healing or protection related things. So that, we'll see how things shake out. But right now, if the card game is designed with the same care that I think it was, then the designers are going to lean on certain ideologies, certain archetypes, certain strategies that are linked to colors. If we're going to talk about this from another card game, let's say Magic. In Magic, green is like the big creatures, the big monsters. Black is about destruction and killing things. Red is about direct damage and aggression. Blue is card draw and denial. And white is like protection and stasis and that kind of thing, right?
I like to say, at least in Magic, blue is rules for thee, not for me.
Yes.
Like, you're only allowed to, draw 1 card per turn. I'm going to draw lots.
Correct.
You're not allowed to cast spells. I am.
Yeah, basically. The fun is a zero-sum game when you're playing blue. But that's kind of what we're getting over here. And as new cards come out, we'll be able to better evaluate. But again, it's a 1-cost common. Restore 3 health. You see this kind of thing in a lot. It's Healing Salve in Magic. It's Sigil of Solace in Flesh and Blood. Every card game has something similar to this. Hearthstone has it.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say that I have found cards like this tend to have more value in games where damage is persistent, right? So that's the main reason I wanted to call it out. I don't think that this is going to, be a barn burner of a card, but it's definitely better in a game like this where the damage sticks around as opposed to like a Magic the Gathering, for example.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think Healing Salve or a card there of the same caliber of Healing Salve, which is like, I think Healing Salve says something like restore 3 or prevent the next 3 damage. So it does understand that there's no persistent damage in Magic, but you're absolutely right. Healing 3 or healing stuff, in Hearthstone, it's the same way. You want to heal your powerful units. You want to give your opponent a headache, being like, this is basically telling your opponent, if you need 2 turns to deal with this, this is going to mess up your plan. You have a fat sentinel on the board, and your opponent is like, okay, well, I'm going to have to come in first with like my saboteur, destroy the shield, do a little damage, and then pass action back to you. Hopefully, when it comes back to me, I can finish it off. This is a great kind of card to say, oh, okay, well, this jams up your plan. That completely ruins your turn. I think that there's probably going to be a couple of these in circulation in the decks, especially when there's only 1 set of cards that are out there. The 250-something cards or however many there are. You're going to see a hefty amount of these early on, as the card pool is still kind of, basic core as it is. Okay, you did some sleuthing because that's it for the cards. Again, it's July 4th, and we're recording this 5 days before publish due to certain scheduling constraints. So you'll probably see that we're missing some other reveals down the line. Nonetheless, we did get some new artwork, and you actually did some sleuthing on this one right here. This is a really cool one because as it stands up to this point, most of the cards that have been revealed have been very straightforward. It's Greedo, it's Cassian Andor, it's R2-D2. This is one where we don't exactly have a reliable read on what this is beside it being an event. Now, what you did a little bit of translating on this art right here.
Yeah, so this is the art that if you are listening, right? So you are not watching us on YouTube, you don't get to see the visual. It's got different types of stormtroopers. So there's your traditional stormtrooper, there's a Death Trooper in the black uniform. There's what appears to be like a Scout Trooper from like Return of the Jedi when they're on Endor. So there's 3 of them against a wall, and it's kind of like this faded painting that looks like a recruitment poster. And so very clearly, I think the intent is that this is meant for you to either find or, you know, maybe dig for stormtroopers, or maybe it lets you draw cards or something like that if you're playing a villainy deck. But just to be safe, because the poster has Arabesh on it, and if you're not familiar, that's the writing they usually use for Star Wars. It has its own alphabet. I wanted to just make sure that there wasn't any weird hidden Easter eggs. And while the text on some of the lines cuts off at various points because of the degradation of the poster, it's very clearly to me saying, explore the galaxy, join the Imperial Navy. So I don't know if it's going to matter because it's specifically calling out the Navy, because this could go either way, right? It's got stormtroopers that makes me think you're looking for ground units, but maybe this will let you find any Imperial unit. And because it's the Navy, they're also saying, hey, you can find starships with this. Who knows? Again, entirely speculation. We only have the art. We don't know what the actual card text will do, but if it's a recruitment poster thing, you have to assume one way or the other it's making you either search for or draw cards looking for some sort of Imperial unit.
Yeah, a lot of the times, you know what it might be? It might be something like, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, take all ground units that cost 2 or less into hand, or something like that.
Yeah, or it could just be an event that is like a card event version of what Tarkin does for you, right? Like we know that Tarkin allows you to look at the X number of cards of the top cards of your deck. I forget the exact amount. It's 4 or 5. And then you get to pick 2 Imperial units and put them into your hand, right? So,
yeah. Tutoring, I think, is just it's always a powerful tool. 50 card decks minimum. They can go wider than that. So being able to find what you need. This is very much a blue thing for those Magic players. You know, look at the top 5. Look at, put the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order, things like that. Yeah, I think we're...
You know what? That fits with what I said earlier, though, because if there's one thing that I would describe about the Empire, it's rules for thee, not for me. So they are very much a blue, if you're going Magic color identity to kind of the philosophy of the Empire, they're very much aligned.
Yeah, they're Dimir, which is black and blue. If you're looking for a color dichotomy from Magic, I would say that, yeah. But the artwork on this is kind of cool. I like it. I think that this is sort of the first set of teases of art that are not super direct, where you can't just point and say, I know what this is going to be. But we have our ideas, and that's what we got from this. We did get another one. This artwork, as we describe it, it's a Imperial Star Destroyer that is hovering low enough, in very low orbit over a city. Can't quite make out what city it is, but it's beneath the clouds or amidst the clouds. That's how low it is. You have an over-the-top view of this Imperial Star Destroyer over a city where the lights in the little huts and dwellings are lit up. So I get kind of Bespin vibes off of this to a degree. However, what we have here is a Star Destroyer, but I am hard-pressed to think that this is going to be the artwork for an actual Imperial Star Destroyer.
What's really interesting about this card to me is that it very well could just not be a Star Destroyer. It could be an event, because when I look at this, it's low to the ground. The image evokes something where the sky is oppressing that which is beneath it. Now, I know that they said that there's not going to be a lot of direct interaction between space and ground, but you and I have called for some sort of card that does that, and we keep mentioning things like some sort of like orbital bombardment or whatever. But this also could just be something else, because there's no guns firing, there's no cannons, smashing the sides of buildings here. It's just kind of hovering. But maybe this says something like, because of the presence of the sky, units lose Saboteur until the end of turn, for example, right? Like it might represent like the watchful eye of the Empire. I could also see where this actually is a Star Destroyer card. And my reasoning for that is that I think we're going to get a couple of different cards that represent capital ships in the game. And for lack of a better term, right, if we have small, medium, large, and executor, this could be the small one. Maybe they show it against a planet side so that you're understanding that this is smaller scale. You know, it's going to come into the orbit of a planet and still hover, but it is also still a Star Destroyer. And then some of the larger ones that are, you know, huge and meant to be like the aircraft carriers, these big hulking beasts, they'll be shown out in space. So I could see this as a card for the Star Destroyer, but it really does feel like some sort of event or tactic card where something is happening to show the oppression, because that's the vibe I get from it.
Yeah, that's the vibe I get from it too, is that it's meant to show dominance. It's a you know, kind of like a peacocking, you know, like thing here. And I could be wrong. I'm not brushed up on my Star Destroyer classes. It could be a Victory class Star Destroyer, which is a smaller version of it. But the vibe I get from this, and this was when we get to the basically the meat and potatoes of the episode, which is the 10 things that we want to see still from this card game. One of them that I was wrestling with were ongoing effect-related cards, things that kind of change the dynamic, change the environment in which things are going on. Star Wars CCG had a lot of these. There's obviously enchantments in Magic, things of that nature. What I see here is perhaps it is a Star Destroyer, and the artwork on this, where it imposing its dominance over the city, just saying, hey, by the way, we're here. This could be something where if you're like, if this is the only, if your opponent has no capital starships in space, all of the ground units have -1, -0. So they're kind of feeling a little less, you know,
Rebellious,
a little less rowdy, if it will. That's kind of what I'm getting from the artwork from this particular release. But we don't know yet. We're not sure. Could it be the first Star Destroyer? Maybe it's just a generic Victory class Star Destroyer image. You know, here we go. Here it is. But what I'm super excited for, which Star Wars did so well, was, or Star Wars CCG did so well, was give you unique named legendary-esque Star Destroyers of like, this is the Devastator, this is the Avenger, this is the Chimera, you know, which all had their moments within the Star Wars canon, within the lore, and they got cards, and the cards in that game very much had personality-based game text, you know, like what did like the Chimera when you had Thrawn aboard was like just this dynamite card, and when Admiral Piet was on the Executor, he did some crazy stuff as well, or on the Avenger when he was Captain Piet aboard the Avenger. Like, there's some good stuff here, but I think that this card could very well be an event, and I think we're on the same kind of wavelength of it's an oppressive move, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like to me. It just looks like a show of force. That's the best way I know how to describe it, right? You said it. Peacocking. It's, hey, we're here. We want you to know it. So scurry away to your hidey holes, little rebels. We got you under our thumb. That's what I see, or at least that's what I get from this art.
So the episode today is going to be the 10 things we want to see with this game. Again, recording on July 4th. I have to reiterate this because as more information comes out, some of this stuff might happen, or it might not. Based on what they release, they might just completely throw away some of these ideas. But we've got 10 things, 5 apiece, in no particular order. I'm going to let you lead off here, Charmer. What is one of the 10 things that you would like to see from Star Wars Unlimited?
One of the things that I would love to see, and I hope we'll see it long term, even if it's not right out of the gate, is support for deck archetypes that don't lean too heavily into heroism or villainy. We know from the quick start rules that cards will never have both heroism and villainy on them, right? They'll be one or the other, and then they'll also have some of those other traits associated with them. So that tells me that there is some emphasis on those two traits, maybe say, more than vigilance, things like that. And that makes sense, right? You don't want, for lack of a better term, the good and the bad to mix, the light and the dark. Like, that's a very I think, tantamount thing to Star Wars and its lore. However, I think there are a lot of great characters in what I would describe as the gray area. So there's an argument to be made, for example, that a bunch of your bounty hunters that are very well known are just doing their job. They're not necessarily villainous. Now, Jabba the Hutt, I think, would not shock me if we see villainy as a trait on him. After all, it's, you know, the scum and villainy is the way that we describe some of those ne'er-dwellers on Tatooine. But there are several factions in the Star Wars universe and in Star Wars canon that are at least attempting to be neutral, right? They're not pro-rebellion. They're not pro-empire. They're just kind of living on the outskirts, doing their own thing, kind of in the wild west of the galaxy. And I would hope that we get some support to build decks around those. Like, I would love to just play like a Tusken Raider Jawa deck, right? Just a bunch of, you know, nameless, in some cases faceless beings that are out there screaming at Utini and, you know, taking pot shots at you on your speeder. Like, I don't know why, it just makes me happy.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's pretty rad. Like, I think that there's this clear sort of schism between heroism and villainy is because, like you mentioned, it's going to be very awkward when you've got Luke Skywalker fighting alongside Darth Vader, where, you know, they're not on the same, you know, maybe, like, to me, if you're having that, it's that kind of separation of the two is purely so that if you do want to have these kinds of, you're going to be paying the tax over the top of fitting in this aspect, right? And I get it, and I totally understand it. But at the same time, you never know, man. Like, maybe Vader and Luke were at the same bar and somebody put on a song, and at the same time they're both like, I love that song. And then they're like, oh, did we just become best friends? And it's a Step Brothers kind of thing, but one's the other one's dad. No.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just the two of us, the Will Smith version. And then...
That version sucked. I'm sorry. You know what I realized over time? Every Will Smith song that has ever been on the radio has been sampled from a other successful song in history. Every single one. You name me a song that has been played on the radio, Men in Black, Getting Jiggy with It, Summertime, I think, as well, Wild Wild West.
I was about to say, what about the Wild Wild West?
Wild Wild West, 100% taken from something else. Yeah. So
what about wait? What about Parents Just Don't Understand?
That might be an original. That is original, but to be fair though, that's when he was working with Jazzy Jeff. When he was with Jazzy Jeff, when he was the Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff, they were creating music. He was writing lyrics and rapping, and Jazzy Jeff was making actual music. Then they went their separate ways. Jazzy Jeff still successful, still does parties, still does shows. Will Smith, big actor, now he doesn't have time, so he just samples music, pays the royalties, and goes on with his life. But this isn't a Will Smith podcast. So, yeah, I get what you're saying there. And I think that that's definitely something I would like to see as well. I got one for you, Charmer.
Mm-hmm.
I want, and we discussed this a little bit in the previous episode, but I want bases to be more than just an aspect and a health total. And I suspect that is what's going to happen. And maybe we're not going to get these in the first set, but I think that it is all signs are pointing to FFG putting out more bases that are different health totals, different aspects, maybe no aspect, maybe double aspect, who knows, but that have game text and significance outside of that, of the number and the icon. To me, I want a card that is like Yavin 4, right? And Yavin 4 is a base that is well protected and hidden and stuff like that. But at the same time, its protection is in its secrecy. So maybe the life total is different, like it's a lower life total, but it allows you to, you know, it's like the game text of it is like at the end of your turn, you draw an additional card and discard a card. So it allows you to cycle through your deck a little bit more, a little faster, though the life total is like 25 instead of 30. Or maybe you have you just have a double aspect base that has 20 life, and maybe that's what it is. And that allows you to put in all the aggressive stuff. You go face and you don't care about the extra 10. But I really want these bases to have more significant impact on deck building and gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think one of the very first things that you and I had talked about was that we want like the iconic Hoth base to show up. And I'd like it, honestly, to be like an option for both players, but in different ways, right? Like I want the Hoth base to maybe start with shields and have less health. And then that's, the entire thing, right? Like the Empire has to get rid of the shields before they can assault the base. And I would also just like a planet Hoth location, maybe not necessarily the true base, but you could call it like the Imperial Forward Camp on Hoth or whatever, but something that gives like a bonus to AT-ATs, right, for assaulting on Hoth. I just also want it to kind of play into your deck building and your design, because that was one of the things that I know you and I both loved about the old Decipher Star Wars game, is that the locations mattered. And it wasn't just about like picking a base that was your health total, your aspect. It was literally like you would build your deck around doing things at these locations. And I would still like the choice of your base to matter in this game as well.
Yeah, and I think it will. I genuinely think it will. Otherwise, they would have just given you a life total, honestly. And like I get it that there's an aspect associated with it, but they're not going to print bases and seed them in packs if they weren't significant to a degree. And Star Wars CCG had a plethora of rare locations because they were important. Like you draft them at the time, or you get them because they were just very helpful. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more rare bases and perhaps even premium versions or higher end rarity. But yeah, what else we got?
All right, so this is something that I also really want to happen, because part of the reason that I like Star Wars as an intellectual property when it comes to building games is that there is so much rich storytelling history that you've got to find ways to make that appear in your game. So what I want is some iconic like actions, some epic actions that do something swingy in niche scenarios, but that also reflect their power in a meaningful way. So like, I'll give you an example, right? You might have an action that's like, Anakin turns to the dark side. Don't know what we'll call it. We'll call it like Vader's, birth or whatever. I don't know. What the point is like, if you see your opponent and they have Anakin, like light side Anakin, then your action kills their Anakin and lets you summon a Vader from your deck. You've literally turned him to the dark side. Or on the other side of the fence, if like you control Luke and your opponent controls Palpatine, you can gain control of target Darth Vader, right? Like you turn him back to the light to backstab Emperor Palpatine at the end. Again, it's going to be something that has like very specific setups because they're probably pretty swingy effects. But that storytelling part and being able to relive those moments that we all kind of love from the movies and the shows, I think is really important. And, the card art for Repair that we were talking about earlier, obviously showing the robotic hand. So there's definitely got to be something where it's like disarm, but like the art is that you're literally lopping the arm off as well. Something like that, right? Like they have to play into those moments in my mind.
Yeah, and this is coming from an IP that has so many iconic moments over so much media that it's not going to be difficult where maybe there's a card that is like an epic event or something along those lines where, a trench run or if like these long shot type of high risk, high reward, or, like very fringe type of things that have so many dominoes that needed to be lined up in order to have this massive bonus, this huge payoff, where it's like, oh, if the Millennium Falcon destroys, a Black Squadron TIE fighter and Vader is on the table, Vader is shuffled back into the deck, like something like that. Or,
yeah. We were talking about like potential alternate win conditions last week. I had thought about another one that it would be one of those things where you have to do a bunch of stuff to pull it off, but like doing the Kessel Run, even if it's not like a full alternate win con, if it's something that gives you a big, like, you know, game lasting bonus that turns the tide, like that's something else that I think would be really cool.
Yeah. There's so many. I mean, blowing up the Death Star, blowing up Alderaan, doing the Kessel Run, completing your Jedi training, confronting Vader. There is a laundry list of massive events that have occurred that you can easily translate. That in itself can be an episode that we do, where we're like, okay, we're each going to come up with 3 of these alternate win condition scenarios, and we'll design the supporting cards. We've got plenty to talk about, baby, because again, we're like 6 months away from this game seeing the light of day. But yeah, that's a pretty solid one. I like that one. I'm all for that. Okay. The number 4, I guess, on the list is going to be, I want to see a lot more consistent ground and space interaction. This was one of my lowlights, I guess, from the previous episode in our impressions of what the rule set were. And some of the listeners actually brought it to my attention that there are cards that actually do this, like Maximum Firepower is a card. Maximum Firepower is like one space unit or a unit deals damage to another unit, then another of your units deal damage to another unit. So you're it's like this 2-for-1, go in there, team up, smashing unit, and it doesn't specify ground or space. It doesn't isolate them there. So you might have an X-Wing and an A-Wing teaming up to take on an AT-ST or something on the ground where they go bam, 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 and they're gonzo, right? However, it's not baked into the rules that there's interaction, and Maximum Firepower is absolutely a card that gives me a brighter, more confident sense that this is something that they're absolutely going to visit. But I want there to be enough of these. I don't want somebody to say, well, I've basically exhausted all of my ground resources and you own the ground now, I have no way to deal with you. Or somebody who leans heavily on space presence has no tools to tackle a ground-based deck. I think cards like Maximum Firepower are going to be great because I would love to see, the Executor and, the Avenger come in and blast the hell out of like a Snowspeeder. It's like, all right, well, Snowspeeder has 3 health. My Executor does 14 damage to it, and my Avenger does 8 damage to it. And the other question is like you were talking about these massive starships having overrun, or was it overrun? Was it called?
No, in this it should be overpower, I believe, or overwhelm. Yeah, overwhelm.
Imagine, I wonder if the overwhelm damage counts, because that in itself is a strategy where you just use something like Maximum Firepower and your 2 biggest overwhelm units on like some weenie on the board, like some poor clone trooper just came out of the vats of Camino and stares down. The first thing it sees is one of those long neck people, Caminoans, I guess they're called, with their soft melodic voices. And the next thing it sees is 2 gigantic Star Destroyers blasting the living daylights out of it to overrun you for like 14. So, or overwhelm you for 14.
I mean, I think it's nice that you even made it a trooper. Like, I'm waiting for the situation where you blow up a Porg.
A Porg. It's an 0-1. Yeah, it's an 0-1 creature that's on the board. It gets absolutely demolished. And you see, like, Imperial Command is like, we have our orders. Will. Here are the coordinates.
That's why I love it. I just love the mental image of like Grand Moff Tarkin giving the order, and he's like, "Fire on that Porg," and they're like, "Excuse me."
They're all in the Home One war room, and instead of the graphic of the Star Destroyer going up where all the pilots are studying it, it's a mouse droid. And they're like, we found a strategic weakness in the Imperial defenses, so we're launching an all-out assault on this droid. It's like, okay, I see how this works.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Gotcha. I wish I had any kind of animation skills, because I would make that happen. That would be the meme for sure. So yeah, that's what I would like. I would like more cards that allow the bridge between ground and space to be something that is almost a given in any deck.
Yeah, like a ground unit that causes rapid unplanned disassembly, or whatever it's called when your rocket fails to go to space.
What are you talking about? Is this a submarine joke?
No, this is a rocket joke.
Still billionaires.
Still billionaires. It preceded
Okay.
the submarine. But you know what? You know what's better than the jokes that only I get?
What?
Support for draft and limited formats as much as constructed ones for competitive play. I wanted to include this on the list because I know that they're already planning for limited play with the way they're designing and the way that they've talked about things, and I'm very excited to hear that. But there are a lot of games that I've played in the past where draft or sealed or whatever have been an option, but then on the competitive side, there's events that are nowhere to be found, right? Like you do your pre-release, and then that's the only time that you ever get to do sealed. And there might be, one draft tournament every 6 months, and that's it. I really hope that this is a game that will decide to lean as much into draft as it does into competitive. And that's twofold. One, I think it's because it's my favorite way to play the game, and I'm always drawn to games that support that. But also, if I'm being honest, the aspect system and being able to include any card is such a cool and unique thing for limited formats that I think that it would honestly be a crime to not support it on a competitive level, because I think that you're really going to see some interesting articles about, here's your draft guide and whatever start to pop up, and you're going to have a wide variance of opinions, because for some people paying that 2 extra might be worth it, and for others not so much. And so, the idea of what's your pack 1 pick 1, but then what's your pack 3 pick 1, knowing your aspects, but then you're presented with this bomb, do you still take it? That sort of thing. There's just so much here that it would be such a waste if it was not an emphasis.
I'm going to give you 2 scenarios here, and why this draft system I think is going to be pretty good. And I agree with you. I think that draft needs to be recognized as a very important skill set within TCG gaming and competition, no matter what. Flesh and Blood already recognizes this, as does Magic Pro Tour. They do drafts and limited events fairly often. It is definitely baked in and very entwined within how they crown their champions. What I like about this is, here are the 2 scenarios. And again, you said pack 3, pick 1. You're playing Magic. You open a pack 3, pick 1. It's a massive bomb of a card. It's not in your colors. You are inclined to take it because you can splash for it or make that happen. I have done a lot of drafting of March of the Machine with Magic pros, people like Tandon Grace and etc. They've walked me through a lot of drafts, and they've explained to me why splashing for big cards or win con cards is perfectly okay. If you're playing white-green and there's a black card that could potentially just win you the game, you are absolutely drafting it, and you are changing your whole dynamic. So you can do that in Star Wars Unlimited. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2, and I've been in this scenario, I'm drafting Welcome to Wraith in Flesh and Blood. I'm drafting Ninja. I'm drafting Katsu. My pack 3, pick 1. I've been in this scenario. My pack 3, pick 1. I open a Crippling Crush, and I'm like, there's zero way I can ever play this. It is illegal for me to play this. Would I play it for 9? Yes, I would. But I can't do that. I can't pay above a tax because it's just not legal to play. Do I draft it because it's a Majestic card and I'm never going to play it? I might do it because at the time I actually knew that the player to my left was playing Guardian and I was passing left, so I hate drafted it because I didn't want them to have it in this competitive.
I was just about to say, that's what I love so much about this aspect format, is that in other games, it can be the right decision to take a card that you cannot play just because you know the person next to you is going to play it and it would make their deck substantially better. But that's not ever really the thought process here, because now if a card is literally that good, you're probably playing it in this anyway. So from like the end user experience, if you're the player, it went from like, I opened this card and it like feels really bad that I have to take it because I'm not going to get any enjoyment out of it and whatever, to now, like, I opened this card and like, who cares if I have to pay 2 more? Like, I'm excited that I opened it, right? So like the experience is that much better for the players.
Yep, 100%. I agree with you on that. And again, the fact that there's no hard restrictions to deck building opens up the option where you do draft that turn 3 or that pack 3 pick 1 bomb that has nothing to do with what you're doing, but it like good players will recognize that, and rare drafting aside, you'll be like, this is worth 2 on top in this format. And what people don't understand is that, or a lot of people might not grasp when it comes to limited, is that no matter what you're doing, if you're paying 6 or 8 for a bomb of a card, your opponent will likely have no answer for it, and therefore that play, whether it's on turn 6 or turn 8, is good enough to win you that game, and you build your strategy around it. I did this in March of the Machine. There's a card called Glissa that has at the end of turn effect, you can do one of 3 things, all of which were huge. And every time that card came up in draft, it was an auto pick and an auto reevaluation of how I'm playing this draft. In this game too, I'm very, very confident that draft is going to be a massive part of this game. And to piggyback off of what your desire is, I hope that they also integrate draft into their competitive circuit, because like you said, pre-releases are awesome, sealed events are great, but I don't want to have to wait till the first weekend of every new set to be able to go to a location and play sealed for stakes.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
All right. My next one is something I suspect is going to be reserved for the most powerful cards in the game. And if there is a rare, like we don't have a rarity chart yet, but I would suspect that if let's say there's common, uncommon, rare. If there's something above that, like super rare, ultra rare, legendary, whatever you want to call it, my guess is that those are going to be the cards that have my next desire, 3 aspect cards. Cards that are very powerful, difficult to fit into every single deck. It's a build around card. It's almost like a win condition. In my opinion, cards like the Emperor, the Executor, the Millennium Falcon, a souped up Millennium Falcon, these are 3 aspect cards. Your legendary, lore heavy, needle moving, presences within the IP are going to be 3 aspect cards. I would love to see those.
Yeah, I also think that it's something that we will likely see on the really powerful cards. I hope we don't see it on too many, because I also think that helps to kind of preserve that uniqueness. But I do hope that we see it, because there's got to be something in the mechanics that nudges new players into a direction when they're choosing their factions. I think a lot of times, veteran card game players in particular, we forget about how the new player experience and what the process is of learning a game for the first time, and how that requires some pretty obvious kind of flags pointing you in a direction, right? So if you think in Magic, for example, tribal stuff is very like hit you in the face. Oh, I just put all the goblins together. Mm-hmm. Oh, I put all the elves together, and it makes some semblance of a deck, right? We got to have something, I think, in this game that points players in a direction to say, okay, if I want to play like the Luke deck, these are the aspects I'm supposed to play. And maybe printing some big like 3 aspect card is the way you do that, right? Because then you say, hey, this is the card that I want to be my top end, to be my big splash, my finisher. All right, well, I'll run these 3 factions so that I can play it 2 turns sooner. It makes sense. It's nice, it's elegant, and it's new player friendly as far as like that nudging. So I do hope that they exist at some point, even if they're not in the first set. and that they're kind of used for that purpose.
Whew. What else we got?
All right. So this is entirely a vanity one, but this is something that I think is so easy for them to do, and it would be such a big win. Generic cards with either alternate art options or like larger art pieces represented across different versions of the card. So I'll give you a couple of examples that come to mind. In Gwent, which is a game that you covered for many, many years, there were some common cards where there were different pieces of art on them. They were the same card, right? But it was, imagine if you're looking at like a mural of a painting, right? And version 1 is like the first third, then there's like the middle third and the last third. So if you put them all together, it's all one like long art piece representing these cards. I think something like that would be really cool for this game, where if there are, just as an example, different Alliance X-Wings that exist, they're all still commons or whatever, or maybe some of them are more rare in their chase versions, but if you get all 4, right, then when you're building your deck and you can put all 4 in and, you know, they're on the field next to each other, they're the same card, but they look different, but part of the same picture. Like, I've always loved cards that do that. Star Wars is definitely big enough where you can represent that, especially when you think of their epic space battles, you know, some of the epic battles on the ground. I think that you can split that up and do that. The other thing that I think would be a really easy win is for certain generic cards to have alternate art versions for player identity. So if there is a generic lightsaber, right? Not a Darth Vader's lightsaber or a Luke's lightsaber, but just like generic lightsaber. Print versions of that where it's the exact same card, but you have a blue one, a green one, a red one, a purple one, an orange one, a yellow one, etc., right? And again, you might make some of the other colors more rare or whatever, but just giving players to pick their favorite lightsaber color for all their generic ones, you will absolutely get people that chase down certain colors. Like, it's such an easy win. And I would really love it as we start talking about like alternate art stuff. I would also really love it if they explore different ways to make the colors pop. So like, imagine monochrome, like alternate art versions where like the card is monochrome except for the lightsaber color, or maybe foil, but only the blade is foiled or whatever. But for me, like, that was the thing. I just think that Star Wars is a big enough universe, and there's going to be a lot of these kind of like generic cards, generic Stormtrooper, generic X-Wing, even generic lightsaber, where you can give us alternate versions of the non-characters to still make those like chaseable. Like, everybody's going to want a Vader or a Luke or a whatever, but you can also make people excited for the generic cards if you just give them a little bit of difference.
Yeah, a lot that I want to talk about. First of all, when you mentioned Gwent, yeah, those were called triptych arts, which were, like you said, same card, 3 artworks that create, when they're next to each other, creates a bigger perspective. One of the biggest outcries from the community was there was a card, these 3 cards called the Crones. If it, the game text was, if you play one of the Crones, the other 2 would come out of the deck and play next to them. And what drove people crazy was that they would just come out randomly and go left to right, whatever order that they were played. And people were like, they're like, quality of life improvement. Can we get it so when you play one, they all show up in the proper order so the artwork is correct? And they coded that, and everybody was like, easy win. Easy win.
Yeah, didn't they do that for the Witchers too, with like Siskel and...
Yep, the Eskel, I think it is.
Or Eskel, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know why my brain was trying to go Siskel and Ebert there when I know it's Eskel.
Ebert was there too.
Yeah, Siskel and Ebert, you know, known Witchers.
And then out of nowhere, Roper came in. Anyway.
Yeah, he replaced Henry Cavill in season 4, I hear, right?
I hate you so much. So... There was that, and again, I highly agree with you here. And all you need to look at is the Lord of the Rings set from Magic the Gathering. There are Ring Wraiths. Ring Wraith is a card. It's an uncommon. Uncommons are going for about $15 because they have 9 variants of one for each Ring Wraith. People are collecting them because they're beautiful looking cards. If you get like a full art foil Ring Wraith, those are like $40 or $50 because people want to collect all 9 in the best variant they have. And like you mentioned, you said this, the lightsabers, I was thinking like kyber crystals, the same thing. If you're like, well, the green or the blue lightsabers are seeded in such a way where like 80% of them are, or like 50% of them are blue, 20% of them or 25% of them are green, 20% of them are red, and then the remainder 5% are purple. I think that would be crazy good. And the problem here is that I don't know if FFG has the same kind of Wizards of the Coast Hasbro money, because we discussed this early on in this show, that one of the biggest costs associated to developing a card game is the art. So if all you're doing is changing the hue of a lightsaber, that can maybe circumvent. I don't know the legalities. I don't know the contract. Like, if somebody submits a piece of artwork, does that mean like, hey, you can't touch it, and if you want to change the color, you're paying me twice? I don't know how that works. But I think that is an easy win. And if anything, if you want to sell boxes, alternate art. Star Wars CCG did it. They did a lot of their rares. You can get an alternate art Maul. You can get an alternate art of all the Jedi. And those go for big money because people, like you said, they want to flex, baby. They want to show up not with the easy seeded blue lightsaber. They want to show up with the super rare purple lightsaber. They want to be like, hey, this is only 5% of the lightsabers printed are purple, and I got one. I think that's an easy win for FFG. Speaking of which, this is a good segue to my next desire, which is on the topic of vanity, cosmetics, etc. What I want to see is vanity and cosmetic-based chase cards, not staples, not high-rarity card, or I don't want strong cards, playable cards that people want 3 of, hidden behind the highest rarity tiers of legendary or whatever is above rare, as it were. And they're going to be printing stuff that's above rare. Everybody does it. Every card game that's out there has something above rare, be it majestic, mythic, whatever. And even further than that, card games are now printing things that are like 1 per case. So, or Fableds in Flesh and Blood, which are playable cards that are like 1 out of 4 cases, 1 out of 500 packs or 1,000 packs. So I want those types of rarity collectible cards, those cards that the whales that are chasing after are not, only there. I want it to be like, oh, you've got the Leader Vader that is a rare. Cool. Did you know that there's an alternate art super foiled out version that is like the ultra rare chase card? It's 1 out of 10 cases. Like, you got it? Great. It's a $600 card. Congratulations, you pulled it. Everybody else who wants to play that card can go buy the $2 version or the $1 one that's a rare, or 50 cents or whatever. You're not hiding gameplay behind a paywall. But for the people who are very, horny for that kind of bling, you can go out there and get it. But it's
this is where we dip into sports cards for some inspiration, because Star Wars is like a unique intellectual property where you could do some of the things that are done in like collectible sports cards. Imagine you get the game-worn jersey Han Solo, and it's like one of the stunt doubles jackets has been shredded and put into cards. Or, you get the autograph for Vader, but it's James Earl Jones's signature on it. Or just something silly like that. Like, was it Kiss? I think it was Kiss, the band Kiss, that one of their albums they printed, they each member put their own blood in the red ink for printing of the, like, either the album cover for like the vinyl, like the sleeve, or it was the actual pressing of the vinyl itself, which was so weird to think of. But I'm almost certain that this is an actual thing where it's like the first 1,000 prints had their blood within the ink of some aspect of the printings or whatever. So don't bark up that tree, because I am proudly a
a staunch defender of cheapest legal version is what I'll play, but the addendum to that is unless it's Star Wars, and the ultra addendum to that is
Han Solo.
Yes, so
That's why I started this with game worn jersey Han Solo jacket.
I know, because if you're there and you're like, it's like, oh, this card. But again, the problem there is, well, you know what? It might not even be a problem because cards that start the game on the board can be whatever shape, size, or whatever that they are.
Right. So it would be for like your leaders.
Yeah, your leaders, or it's like, if your base is like Jabba's palace or whatever, like in it is like a piece of Gamorrean guard skin, like from the costume that's printed. They're not going to do that because
imagine you rub your thumb over some rubber and it's like from Jabba's animatronic suit or whatever.
Or what if there's like you have like a Wampa cave and it's scratch and sniff, and you could scratch the card and smell the Wampa cave and it smells like ass. Wholesale, full-on, free-range ass.
The cave is going to smell fine. It's the tauntaun that you got to worry
about. Oh,
about.
yes. Okay. Tauntaun carcass is going to be a base.
No, you know what? It should be an upgrade. You give your character.
Give your character, yeah. And if you're on, if your base is Hoth, you get +1 like health on your character, but you smell like pure grain-fed ass. Okay, just take it away from here, please. We got two left. We got 2 left.
All right. So the last one I want to cover. Yes. Fully upfront about this being entirely self-serving. However, there are other reasons. I hope that we get some broadcast support for large organized play events. Now, clearly, both Flake and myself, we do commentary for card games. We have for many years. We enjoy doing it. We would love to work Star Wars events. It would be like a dream come true. But as somebody who also plays a lot of card games that I do not do coverage for, it can still be quite the pain to get good quality info about how events are going, even like days after the fact when there is not any sort of broadcast coverage. And as a competitive player, right? And if you want a good, thriving competitive scene, I think that it is sometimes not really valued the way that it should be because of how quickly it disseminates good information to the community that care about your competitive events. So I don't want to be in a situation where, if there's a big event in California or, again, global phenomenon, right? It's Star Wars. It might be something overseas, right? An event in Australia or, the Asia Pacific region. I don't want to be in 3 Discords pinging people to be like, hey, did you get a deck list? Do we know who won? What were they playing? How did it go? I've been there and it's not fun. So even if, and again, I hope that we do get the opportunity to work, but even if they do organized play and Flake and I never get to cast for it, I still want them to do broadcast stuff for it, because as a actual player, as a consumer of competitive content, it is a really big deal for kind of cultivating that community.
Dude, I'm glad you put it on the list because I didn't have the shamelessness to throw it on there, although I definitely wanted it to.
Listen, a long time ago, somebody that I respect very highly got in my head because I've got some issues with imposter syndrome. And so I offer this advice to any of our listeners. What they told me is that you need to let other people tell you no. If you tell yourself no before you start, then you have your answer, right? But all you can do is ask. Let somebody else tell you no. If you got that job you want, put in the resume. If they don't give it to you, okay, great. But you let them tell you no. So that's where I'm at.
Sage advice. It works. Trust me. If I listen to my inhibitions and my restraint at all times, I wouldn't be where I'm at. That's just a fact. So, yeah, broadcasting would be just great for competition and whatever. And from the discussions that I've had with people at FFG, they're pretty serious about this, and I can't go into too many details because we're not allowed. But that's we're not allowed. I'm not going to lie here, but we're not allowed. However, what I am very much suspecting is, and again, I can't confirm because I don't know 100%, or I can't tell you. I would suspect that they are going to do broadcasting, and I think that that's something that all competitive card games need to have, at least the higher tier of events, to just kind of show that, hey, this is the reality of it is that the ROI on this, the return on investment when it comes to broadcasting, is minimal. It is minimal. It is an expense, and people will argue and say, but it's marketing, it puts the name out there, you put good people and all this stuff in front of people's eyes, and if they can create an environment where the casual player will tune in and immediately be gripped by the card gaming and the narrative created by the broadcasters. And for those who, I hate to sort of toot our own horn on this stuff, it's not just about naming the card and what it does. You're creating a narrative, you're telling a story or you're basically translating the story that the players are telling and engaging the people who are out there. And yeah, you're naming the cards and the significance and whatever. But a good broadcast is so appealing. I will watch Overwatch League on mute unless somebody like Uber is doing the cast, or somebody else who is doing the cast that drags you into it, because you can watch and you can see what's going on. But when they're really painting a picture, it adds so much to the game. And I think that from a competitive standpoint, the players who are at the tournaments grinding are not going to care too much about this kind of stuff, but they are a minute percentage of the people who are consuming the game on a global scale. And if an event has 1,000 people at it, which I think is perfectly within the scope of reality for Star Wars Unlimited, there's 1,000 people at a tournament event. 500 to 800 in the main event, plus all the side events and all the other hoopla. You're going to have another 20,000 who are curious as to what the hell is going on at that tournament. And of those 20,000, you might have 2,000 to 5,000 who are willing to tune in and see how it happens live, because they're either bored, invested in the game, want to see how the meta shakes out, want to see how their favorite player shakes out. The culture within Flesh and Blood right now that Magic has cultivated over years is, when you're talking about competitive Flesh and Blood, you're not talking about decks, you're talking about players. And that's the truth when it comes to Magic as well. There are players who are out there making names. Now, it's a much larger game, obviously. But Charm3r, when I talk to you about Flesh and Blood and the people moving the needle on that, you're not tuning into the Calling Cincinnati because, hey, I want to see how Azalea is going to do. You're tuning in because you're like, I want to see what Brody Spurlock, what Michael Hamilton, what Pablo Pintor, what Matt Folks, what these players are doing with new cards. I want to see how that happens. I want to see how it unfolds. I want to see the new stuff that they do. And in an environment where there's no digital client, which I don't think there's going to be for this game, I genuinely don't think there's going to be for this game, at least for a little while, you need that kind of presence. Otherwise, it's just rumor, hearsay, and post-game reports, which are not as fun.
To go even further, it's not even just the players, but it's also sometimes players and specializations at the same time. So to piggyback off the Flesh and Blood example, Flesh and Blood is a hero-centric game if you are somebody listening to this and you're not familiar. So when you play that game, you choose a hero. Just like how in Star Wars Unlimited, you're going to choose a hero or a leader and your base. And there are some players in the Flesh and Blood community that are just well known for a specific hero. So they might not be, a top 10 player in the world, but they're maybe like the top player for that hero. So they still have a name for themselves. I think of, Mara Ferris, for example, on Dromai. If you want Dromai info, you go to Mara. I think that you could run into something similar in Star Wars Unlimited because it's, again, leader and character focused. Yes, you're still building a deck and so forth, but the idea of hey, maybe somebody wants to just be the best Luke player, the best Leia player. I think that broadcasts help build that story as well.
Yeah, you're gonna have people who are like, "Oh, dude, I pulled these cards." You see these posts all the time on Reddit for different card games where it's like, "Oh, I just bought a couple boxes. I got X, Y, Z big pulls. What can I build? What should I build?" And then immediately, what a lot of the people say are like, "Oh, you got this. You should check out so and so's list." It's like, "Oh, I got some good cards like Villainy, Cunning, Command." Well, like, oh, well, the Villainy, Cunning, Command expert is so and so, Darth Prentice, who's a friend of the show. It's like, not saying that that's the truth, but it's like these are people that you can go and find out, or say like something like, "Oh, I want a good restore list." Well, dude, the people who are the experts on this are like the Saga Cast people, or the iRebel, Jedi Geek Girl's really great at heroism aggro decks. So heroism aggression decks, like she's got that down pat. Go see her stuff. This is what's going to develop, and the way that you get to this point is that first year is usually volatile. That's where people are starting to posture themselves, develop their reputations. But I mean, year one of Flesh and Blood, a lot of those names are still relevant today, man. Like the Tarek Patels, the Michael Hamiltons, they're still out there blazing trails. There's a lot of people. Michael Fang, exactly. And you know that if you're going to make a deck, or if you want advice, it's off of their expertise. And they're usually, for the most part, associated with particular archetypes. And how do you get to know these players? How do you become familiar with them? How do you have that, I hate the term parasocial relationship, but how do you develop that kind of connection with somebody? It's through broadcasts and getting to know them over time. And again, I know we're turning what is basically in some people's eyes as, some goon who's just telling somebody what card is being played, to this bigger mosaic, a grander scheme picture that we're trying to paint here. But I've seen it happen. I have absolutely seen it happen. I've been lucky enough to be a part of that. And yeah, man, I mean, I would be honored to be able to do this. But again, this is not a job interview by any means. But I think they know that would definitely be interested in that. Okay. One last one, Charmer?
Yeah, one last one. And I think it's another good one to transition to, given what we were just talking about.
Agreed, because we're talking about the recognition and the notoriety of the players that are developed through broadcasts and frequent success that they may see on these broadcasts. The next one I want to bring up is an online progression system database where you can see your progress. Magic had its DCI system that is defunct now. I don't know if they have something else. Flesh and Blood has like the gem system where you can track your experience points that you're gaining, track your past history. Who did I play against? It's all data that's within a system. XP is tracked in 90-day chunks or lifetime or by year, by region. It gives you a sense, I hate this term, a sense of pride and accomplishment, which is a Reddit meme by now, but ultimately, when I log into my gem account for Flesh and Blood, I'm not going to lie. I look at it and be like, damn, I'm like, okay, I've been doing well in the past little while. My ELO is such. I've gained X amount of experience points. But I want to also add on to this what Star Wars can implement. Flesh and Blood had initially, if you were the first player to 1,000 XP in your region, you got a ultra exclusive card. It was a gold foiled legendary headpiece, the Arcanite Skullcap. At the time, Arcanite Skullcaps in its cheapest forms were like $200 to $300 cards. Getting a gold foil version is like a $10,000 card at the time. I swear to God. So people were grinding that XP to be the first. What I want to see, and this is an idea I actually pitched to other card game companies, that they're like, good idea, but we can't implement it yet, which I'm hoping FFG might be able to do. An experience points reward system where it's like, hey, congratulations on 100 XP. We're going to mail you a foil card. Or your LGS has them. Show them your 100 XP. They'll punch it into the system and they will award you one. 500 XP. congratulations, quite the milestone. Here is a exclusive, we're sending you an exclusive foil variant of X card. 1,000. Like, these milestones that encourage people to play and reward them, not for just winning, but for continuing to stick it out and engaging in, like, something that you can work towards. Because I don't know how many times I've been playing, like, an armory where it's like, okay, like, I can forfeit, get home 20 minutes sooner, or I can play for this 3 useless XP right now, you know, like, and it's useless, and I like playing the game, but if there's nothing I'm playing to, if that XP is kind of worthless to me in the short term, you know, or even the long term, then I might be less inclined.
It kind of reminds me of airline rewards, you know, where when you fly, you know, 100,000 miles, then you get your cool luggage tag or whatever. And I'm down with that. I will say, I think that the really interesting concept for a happy medium for how you get awarded them would be at mid-sized tournaments. Now, I forget, I don't have the chart right in front of me, but I know that they had different levels that you and I were speculating about. But whatever one is like the closest to either a calling or like your regional event, right? That should be where you show your XP. So if you're an XP grinder, you're likely going to those events anyway. But let's say you're not a true XP grinder, you've just been playing casually for a year or so, but you hit one of those thresholds by saying like, hey, if I go to this, you know, somewhat larger event and I show, you know, the TO who's running it that I have this XP threshold, I get a cool card. Maybe they'll, you know, that'll be enough to push them or entice them to go to that like next level. It doesn't have to be like world championships or anything, but not like the local level either. That nice like intermediate, hey, you know, it's a 2-hour drive. Maybe I don't want to make that drive, but now, you know, I'm more willing to do it because I know I can go get my XP reward while I'm out there. Like that sort of thing. I think that would be a great way to incentivize people to show up and try a bigger event for the first time.
Yeah, there's different ways that you can kind of tier them or reward them, but ultimately nobody is going to be upset when they see that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same reason. Like, remember when, you know, for all you console players, when like Xbox achievements was like the first thing, and it's like the first time that little thing. I remember playing like Halo 3 or something, and like playing the campaign, and the first time I got like a 2-for-1 with the sniper rifle, an achievement popped up, and I'm like, whoa, what the hell is this? And I got Xbox points. What do they do? Who cares? I want more. And then you start researching, and it's like, oh, if you beat like this boss with only a pistol, you get this achievement, and only 8% of players have ever achieved this. It's like, I need to be in that exclusive club, much like like you said, the Million Miler Club or whatever. Trust me, I know. I've taken 20 flights this year so far for events. I've got another 12 booked, and there's still more coming. I am on par, or I'm on pace to be like a 35 or a 50K-er by the end of the year. That is status that I've never had in society. That is like, to me, when somebody's like, yeah, your bag is free, I was like, well, pardon me, call me the Monopoly man. Like, that's kind of how I feel, right? And seeing these kinds of things pop up, the progression, it's like, why do I log into Magic Arena or Hearthstone every day? To do my dailies, because I want to progress and earn for, you know, get rewarded for my time. And I think that having these online progression systems is a good way to do that, because not everybody who goes to the Armory or the Friday Night Magic or whatever is going to come away with a prize. But if they go there and grind and say, you know what, I went 2-1, I didn't get the big prize, but I got 6 experience points, that puts me closer to this. They'll at least come away feeling like something good came out of that. And I kind of dig that. And I think that is just overall a good thing.
I dig it.
I dig it too. All right. Well, we've got some fodder for the mailbag, so we are going to the bad feeling mailbag.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Quiet.
What's on the docket, Mr. Charmer?
We had 2 questions for this week, starting with Echo Base Gaming. They say, first of all, great podcast. My question.
Thank you.
Do you guys think bases are designed to only provide health and aspects, or can we expect to see bases with rules on them?
Ooh. Well, okay. This is the second episode now that I dig into the bases part. I am firmly confident that if I were to bet dollars to donuts, I'm slamming an easy G, like fat stacks on the fact that bases are going to have rules on them. You can guarantee it. Will it be in the first set? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I think that when it comes to first sets, usually you just play it safe. But if the next set is like, hey, next set is like a Hoth-based set, and all of a sudden you've got, okay, well, here's a location. It's the shield generator. And the shield generator says, at the end of every 3 turns, put a shield token on it. But it starts at 25 health, or it starts at 28 health, or something like that. It's also, when you have the more metrics on a card, the easier it is to balance, or the more knobs there are to sort of dial in the right frequency to get a card right. To play test the bases and such, maybe that shield that comes down every 3 turns, maybe it's worth 3 health ultimately over the span of a game, or it's not that effective. I am Echo-based gaming. I swear, I am willing to slam down $100 right now to say that there is going to be one by set 2 at the very least.
Yeah, I was going to say that the only way we don't see bases with more rules or text on them is if there are none in set 1, which I could very well see, because a lot of times you start small, you start basic on your base set to introduce people to the game. I like to say, and I've probably even said it before on this podcast, but in case I haven't, I like to say that card games are about establishing a set of rules and then creating cards that break them. So set 1 is very much going to be like, this is what your standard base looks like. And we might not see anything outside of that on set 1. After that, I fully expect differences. So much like Flake, I think it might happen as soon as set 2. So I would say the only way we don't get bases with more text on them is if we only get set 1. Set 1 was generic on purpose, and then a meteor hits planet Earth. We never get set 2, for whatever reason. That's it. I fully expect it to be in set 2. And it's not even just the text on the bases themselves. I also do think that Flake here hit the nail on the head earlier in the broadcast when he said, they made it a card for a reason. They could have just given you a health total, and they could have given you little tokens to represent your aspect or whatever. There's no way that they made these and had art created for them and did all of that for them to just leave it as a health total and an aspect. But I also think that we're going to see beyond bases with text on them, we're going to see cards that care about your base as well, because we see that they have the planet on them, right? It's a location on a planet. So we're going to see units that say, if your base is on Hoth, do, X instead of Y or something like that.
Yeah, there's going to be cards that are if it's going to be like a card that fits in all different things. Where it's like, if there's one of the bases is Hoth, you get this. If one of the bases is Tatooine, you get this. If one of the bases is Coruscant, you get this. And that would play into your opponent's base as well, where it's like, okay, well, I have Hoth, so I'm always getting this bonus. But if my opponent is playing Tatooine or Coruscant, this unit now is way above rate, and that could be part of it. I highly, highly suspect, in fact, I'm going to flat out just say there will be bases that go beyond a 30 health total and 1 aspect. That's what I'm saying. Next up, from Matt Fichtel. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Yeah, nonetheless,
could be Fichtel, right? Sometimes CH is a hard, Michael. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, there's bike is short for bicycle, and Mike is short for mycicle.
No, this silence is not an auditory hiccup. This is my pure disdain for you. That needed time to just gestate.
I have several. I mean, it's actually kind of absurd how many friends I have that are named Michael, and not one of them likes that joke.
You know what?
I'm going to keep telling it, though.
Congratulations. Somebody who's not named Michael also hates that joke. Asking. So Matt Feichel. Fichtel, I'm sorry if that's wrong. Matt, we'll say. I can say I was disappointed to see cartoon art rather than movie stills depicted on the cards, like Star Wars CCG. How much will this impact adoption of the new game? Very good question, because it's the first thing. It's the Tinder aspect of card games. If you look at it, I will be completely blunt when I say that when I look at a Battle Spirits Saga card, I get kind of turned off because it's so busy. It's so, there's so much going on. It's not a clean depiction of a card. I think that the card and the game is fine. Like the artwork is cool. I just think that the way that it's presented is a certain way. That said, cartoony, animated art versus movie stills. Look, I'm with you on that, having grown up with Star Wars CCG. I love seeing the movie stills because it allows me to just immediately dive into that moment and seeing what happened in the movie at that point and how the game text relates to that particular moment of drama or those circumstances. However, I think it's obviously it's going to, I don't know, like what is more expensive? Is it paying for 250 some odd unique artworks? Or is it to pay for the rights to use the stills from the images? I would imagine, unless they're like, maybe they're just giving us the drawn art and then we're going to see movie stills. I don't know, dude, but I genuinely believe that people are going to look at this and be turned off by the artwork. And if you don't have a good, rule set to support it, then you're not going to rescue the player that's already turned off from the art. And that to me is why a game like MetaZoo is an anomaly, because the artwork is terrible and the game's not that great. So how the hell did this sell out? How the hell was this so popular for as long as it was? But yeah, that's my answer.
So I don't want to say something here though, because I also think that there is a bit of a generational difference, right? I loved the movie stills from Decipher's version of Star Wars, and I would absolutely welcome a game back that was doing something similar. And I think that most of us who loved that game also were kind of hoping for something like that. But a lot has changed since that first came out. I mean, that was a game that was releasing, even before we had the prequels at some point, let alone some of the other media that we've gotten since. And so if you're trying to do something that's spanning all of the Star Wars universe now, and you're trying to do movie stills, I think that you would have been putting yourself in a poor position, because you're going to take people out of that immersion if you've got cards that are like from the original A New Hope next to a character from Bad Batch. Like, I think the big difference, and I think the reason that the art is kind of cartoony, is because we've had just as much Star Wars content literally in cartoon format as we have the films. And you're trying to find a way to mix the two and make it look like one cohesive universe. And I do think that many of the people who are younger than me, younger than Matt here, by Matt, I mean Flake, not Matt, the viewer. I don't want to assume your age, but
Matt Feichel?
Yeah, sure, that one. For me, when I think about like my son, who has already watched Clone Wars and Rebels, and he's watching Bad Batch with me, he is not going to care that this art looks cartoony, right? And even people that are kind of, younger than us, but maybe they started with the prequels, were like, let's be honest, even the prequels are kind of cartoony with the droids and everything, as opposed to the original practical effects trilogy. I think that the older generation, and especially ones that played the Decipher game, will have a different feeling about this, but I don't think it's going to hurt adoption a ton. I do think there will be some that are turned off, but I don't think it is as large as us older folks think it will be, personally.
I think you made a good point there when you referenced Stark, your son, because I think that I have to very aggressively remind myself that the player I am is in the minority. Somebody like myself, yourself, we each have like 25-ish years of card game experience playing these games, making it our careers. This is something that I need to I need to put myself aside as being, I am the anomaly in this case, because not everybody is going to say, oh, Star Wars, I'm immediately going to look at the rules and see if this is a game for me. A lot of them are going to be people who are saying, you know what, I've heard of games. I've heard of card games. Like, look at Disney Lorcana. A lot of people in Lorcana have jumped into Lorcana saying, I've never really played a card game, but I like Disney. So let's take a look at it. And for younger people who are getting into the game, like you said, if you see an OG picture of Luke, on Tatooine from A New Hope, that might not be Star Wars to them. That might be, the ancient texts, as it were. Because like you said, maybe they're in their, early 20s and they grew up on the prequels. I grew up watching the original trilogy, so seeing the movie stills on a card game for me was the only way to go. But at the time, when Decipher's game went defunct, there was no Clone Wars, there was no animated series or anything like that. It was just all live action. And right. The battle droids were CGI, and there was some of that for sure. But I think that having a hand-drawn version of stuff is the common ground where you can get the computer animated stuff, you can get the live action stuff, and you can even get things like the Tales of the Jedi, like the animated series, like those types of things, to meet in the middle and say we all exist in this type of artwork form. However, I wouldn't be surprised if, when we're talking about alternate art stuff, where your vanity chase card, your 1 out of 10 cases Vader, is a live action Vader from wherever the hell it's from. But you got to also understand that, hey, you want you want a Bad Batch or like a Rex or a this or a that. Well, he's only in animated version right now. So how are you going to do that? Because you're going to have animated only cards anyways. Those are going to exist.
Yeah, imagine if they were only doing live action, and so then they did cards for like all the different clone troopers, and every one is the exact same headshot of Tamura. Right?
Morrison, yeah.
It's just literally the exact same headshot. They just changed the name on the card. It's like, this is Cody, this is Rex.
Yeah, and they're like, this is how you save money, ladies and gentlemen. There's this really funny Ray Romano bit where he's talking about he's doing a stand-up bit, and he's talking about how I got 2 kids, they're twin boys, which is great because it saves on pictures. I just feel like, yeah, this is my son, and I have another one just like it. It's like just kind of how it feels like with the clone troopers. So yeah, that's my response on that.
I would love to see somebody do a bit where it's like employee of the month, but they don't put the name tags under them, or maybe they do, but it's again the exact same headshot on the wall of clone troopers, but
like Trooper of the Month, and it's just always the same one.
Of the month.
Yeah, it's underneath it is just a chalkboard. They just like scratch out the name, put the new one, but the picture's always the same. Save space. You want to save money on art? That's how you do it. And that concludes the Bad Feeling Mailbag. Not a bad episode. I like it. I like, doing the prediction stuff when it comes to this kind of stuff. Yeah.
I like taking the meandering route through a little bit of everything.
Yeah, we did.
We talked Star Wars. We talked card games.
Next episode, because I'm going to be in Ohio. Maybe we record it together on site. How do you feel about that? Them apples.
I mean, I'm down.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. We got some stuff to do. But friends, thank you so much for submitting to the Bad Feeling Mailbag. If you have a question for the show, for myself, for Charmer, do not be shy. We'd love to hear from you. You can tweet at Wampa Radio. You can also connect with myself on Twitter at WatchFlake and my cohort here at That Charm3r. Because that's the way you roll, bucko. That's the way you roll.
That is correct.
Yeah, BB-8ing all over the place. Thanks for that. What a wonderful...
That's pro-level commentary right there. That is correct, Jim.
I love it, because here we are talking about how we would love to be hired to do the broadcast, and then I just throw to you, and you're like, yes. Yes.
Sometimes I gotta give it to you.
You do. You absolutely do. So from myself and all the Michaels in the world, I am glad that this episode is over. And we will catch you all next week on Wampa Radio. You got to sign us off. I think that we've come to the point where you're always last word on the show.
That's fine. Hope everybody had a safe holiday. Again, we are recording this on July the 4th, which is Independence Day here in America. So I hope you had a safe July the 4th by the time you listen to this, and
May the force be with you.